Hello, everyone. Welcome to Small Talk. Well, my guest today is a writer, a journalist. She's also an Indian residential school expert. I think there's a few other things on her list of accomplishments. Time to meet Kerry Benjoe. Welcome to the show.
It's Kerry.
Kerry, I have it written right here. Kerry, my apologies.
Oh,
Oh,
that's fine.
what a way to start, eh? So I know that you are you still the managing editor at the Eagle Feather News?
Yes, I am.
So when did you get involved in journalism and why?
Actually, it just kind of happened. I didn't plan on being a journalist. That was furthest from my mind because I was always an introvert.
Okay. Yeah.
But I took the Indigenous Communications Arts Summer Institute, which was a crash course in journalism. I had already received my BA in English and Indigenous Studies because I had plans on becoming a lawyer. But
Ah,
at that time, I took on the responsibility of three nieces and a nephew.
hmm,
So moving them to another city for me to pursue my post-secondary wasn't an option. I didn't want to disrupt their lives. So I stayed in the city and just found something else and just kind of happened on the Indigenous Communications Arts program and the Summer Institute. And I found that it was perfect for my area of expertise. Like I knew how to research and I knew how to write, and then putting them together in a news article, it just seemed to fit. And to have that instant um, response from the public and to have members in the community say, "Oh, I didn't know you're a journalist. I didn't know you're a journalist." And they would tell me, they would pitch me stories, but I was just a freelancer at the time.
hmm,
And so that's how it began. I was a stay-at-home mom, freelancing for these community newspapers, Indigenous ones like Eagle Feather News.
right.
And eventually I I had enough clippings, like when you're published, you clip out your article, and that's called a clipping.
Okay.
This opportunity opened up at the Regina Leader Post. And so I applied. I went in there with my little book of clippings, and they hired me.
Cool.
And after 6 months, they said they were keeping me. And so that wasn't well. I started my career in like 2002, so it's been over 20 years.
Wow.
Um, and I stayed at the leader post until 2017,
Mhm.
and then I had some health issues, which resulted in me losing my left leg. I'm an amputee,
Oh, wow.
and yeah, and so I thought my journalism career was behind me, but I've always had a love for learning. And so instead of sitting home while I was in the process of recuperating, I got my leg in 2019, January 2019, September 2019. I was in the master's course I was taking my Master of Journalism at the U of R. And so 2020, I finished my project, got my Master of Journalism, and was hired recruited by CBC, where I became their first Indigenous storyteller.
Wow.
And so I worked there for a year, and then the person who gave me my first break, the one who hired or printed my very first article, John Lajamodier, was retiring from Eagle Feather, and he was looking for a team to take on the paper. And
Right.
so I left my cushy job and dived headfirst into community news where the future is uncertain. And for 2 whole years, we produced the paper. And then January, we had to go on hiatus because of the Online News Act and, the impact it had on our ad sales and our ad revenue. Because when you're a community newspaper, I should say we service the entire province. Our paper is free of charge to all First Nations,
Okay.
all First Nations and Métis locals, as well as some government, like First Nations University, Gabriel Dumont, educational institutions. And so that is a really high cost, you know, getting it printed and shipped to Regina and then or Saskatoon and then distributed by Canada Post. Like the cost to do all that is what really hit us hard. And so January made the decision to take a hiatus from producing a monthly paper. And since then, I've been working behind the scenes and looking at ways to get or revamp Eagle Feather, looking at ways to relaunch our website and creating a different type of print medium, because as much as people say print is dead, there are communities in the far north that have no access to any type of news service. And so Eagle Feather fit that need, you know, like
Yes.
to let them know that they're not forgotten, you know, and we want to still provide them with positive Indigenous content, you know, something a little different from mainstream, because no fault to mainstream. I worked in mainstream almost my entire career, but I know the newsrooms are shrinking. And so there is a limited amount of resources. There's a limited amount of people who could do stories that aren't just breaking news. So a lot of trauma-based stories,
Yeah.
like crime and a lot of negative
Right.
stories, and predominantly a lot of Indigenous people are in those stories just because of, you know, the way life is, you know, marginalized communities tend to be, you know.
But if you can focus on anything that's positive, it's good for everybody, isn't it?
Yeah, and for me, like to be able to tell these stories
Mhm.
and to share them, like all the good things that are happening within First Nations communities, and helping to change that narrative of Indigenous people, not just helping to build our community, but also sharing those stories with the greater public. You know, our stories, our publication goes to um, like school divisions, like large school divisions, like the Saskatoon School Division, um, Regina Public. Some schools subscribe to. Um, there's larger school divisions that do subscribe to Eagle Feather, and they like to see those stories, and it's shared. And so we're reaching a lot of audience that is not Indigenous, and so I think it's really important, and we feel that niche. We're not. I don't feel we're in competition with mainstream media, but actually we're a complement, because we can bring those stories forward, and actually a lot of people within mainstream will share like a really cool Eagle Feather news story, or
Right.
they'll follow up on stories we've done, and so that's just I'm doing my part to tell the other side of Indigenous people.
Yeah, and I think that's really good. You know, I'm hearing more and more positive stories when it comes to Indigenous people. You know, whether it's their sports teams. There's a girls' sports team. I forget who I interviewed her now. I can't remember who reports on that. And there's just a lot of good stuff, right?
Mhm.
I interviewed a young man out here from Abbotsford who has a canoe club with young people, young Indigenous people, and those are wonderful stories.
Mhm. And
So
I think that goes a long way in helping to change people's perception of Indigenous people, and cut those um, racial sort of um,
well, they have preconceived ideas. Let's face it.
mhm,
I mean,
those
you
bias.
know, I'm not First Nation, so I can understand what you're saying. Like I have a lot of people, we talk about this all the time, and it's like, why do you think they're all drug addicts or alcoholics or whatever, right?
Mhm.
Because we know there's all kinds of you, or many of you who have wonderful accomplishments, a lot of you, and we need to hear more about it. Yeah,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah, for sure. Now you said you were a writer. Now, is that writing to do with journalism, or are you also a novelist or anything like that as well?
Um, Primarily my writing has focused on journalism, but I'm in the process of writing more longer features that are semi-autobiographical.
Mhm.
I found that, I do a lot of editing and I don't do a whole lot of reporting anymore. And
Okay,
so there has been a shift in how I want to write. And so this is a perfect time for me to like pass on the journalism skills to younger people
yeah,
and concentrate on my story and the stories I want to share and the stories I want to tell, because I come my own personal experience. There is so much that I would like to share with people, and people have asked me to share my stories, like what it's like being someone who's survived domestic violence, which is why I've lost my leg, and how I was able to overcome that and not shy away from being very public about it.
right,
Because to be in journalism, to be out there still, um, just sort of in the spotlight. I'm not like in the spotlight, so to say, but I'm out there in the public. I'm meeting people, I'm talking to people, and I'm not the same person. I'm very physically different,
right,
but I don't let my disability hold me back. And I want to show people that, there is life after, you know, these these events. Like there is life after amputation. And I'm very positive. I'm very um I try
mm,
to live my life and by example, like to show people, not just tell people, oh, you could do it, you could do it, but rather showing them,
yeah,
don't let something hold you back from your dreams. I never thought I would be a business owner. I never thought I would be an editor. I never thought that I could do this until I actually lost my leg. Before I was quite content behind my desk telling other people's stories, um, not being out there, not speaking. One of the reasons I chose print journalism is because I was essentially an introvert. I didn't like the sound of my own voice. I didn't like looking at myself on camera. So I stayed away from that type of journalism, but I still loved reporting on things. So print fit my lifestyle perfectly. But after, going through what I went through and facing these life-changing situations, I decided, like, right there before they wheeled me into surgery, I told my mom, I'm going to do something good with this.
um,
And so any opportunity that comes, I just take it. I don't second guess anymore. I just take it because life's too short
yeah,
to say, what if, like I should have. Now I don't think of I should have. If somebody asks me, I just do it and I figure it out later. I just say yes and and go about doing it, figuring out how I'm gonna do it later.
mm,
I I jump on everything and that's really opened up a lot of doors for me. I've become a political um pundit. I've appeared on Global TV,
mm,
APTN, CBC, and instead of, just quietly existing, I'm just living, I guess I'm living out loud now. And one of those reasons is because I want to be in control of my own life, my own voice, and my own destiny. I won't let anyone or anything hold me back now and not um, second guess what is possible. For
mm,
me to come from that situation and to be a business owner and to be recruited by these very large organizations because they see value in what I give and what I have.
Right.
And it's very empowering. And I looked at what happened to me as a lesson,
Yeah.
take every bad situation and think about it and ask yourself, what am I supposed to learn from this? And that's the attitude I give when anything bad happens, anything like life throws at me. I sit and I digest it, and I think, you know, what am I supposed to learn from this, and what do I do next?
Yeah. I can kind of relate a little bit, I grew up in a state of constant fear and anxiety until I was threatened with a loaded shotgun. And at that moment, first of all, I knew I couldn't do anything about it. But at that moment, I realized, like, you know, if this is the worst that's ever going to happen to me, like I responded with anger, and then that changed me, and I lost my fear. I still have anxiety though. That's still there. Um, One of the things I want to ask you about too is that you are an expert on the Indian residential school. Um, Now, why did you want to become, why did you delve into that? Um, Sorry, I don't even know how to word it. But yeah, why did you want to find out all about that?
It's not about finding out about it. It's my lived experience. Four
Okay,
generations of my family went to residential school. I'm the last in my family to attend a residential school,
my
and it
apology.
wasn't until I was doing my Master of Journalism project that I really started to look at residential school and how it ultimately changed me mentally.
Right.
I'm a completely different, um, growing up in like living in an institution, all and separated from your family. It
Mhm.
changes how you think, it changes how you react, it changes how you interact in society.
Right.
Um, in some ways, it's given me strength because I've learned to stand on my own 2 feet, but also at the same time, I've disconnected from my community and I feel disconnected from my family because while I was there, my family was continuing to live, create memories with each other,
Mhm.
and I was separate. And the memories I was creating was with the people I was living with,
Right.
because residential school, you're there like you. For me, I was there almost throughout the entire school year, and I didn't go home.
Okay.
And so there's this disconnect from my biological family. There's this disconnect from my community. I never went home after I graduated.
Oh,
After I finished, I never went home. Like I didn't go to my mom's house and unpack my bags because that didn't feel like home anymore.
yeah.
And I never knew how fundamentally changed I was from this experience until I was studying it, because I never claimed to be a residential school survivor I did up until 2020 when I was doing
Mm.
my project
Okay.
and looking at everything and sort of putting the pieces together and analyzing it. And there was a lot of tears shed. There was a lot of, recognizing my own trauma
Yeah.
and recognizing, just realizing how much I actually lost because of that school,
Right.
and being so upset because, when you're a child, you shouldn't have to choose um, your family over your education. I wanted to get my grade 12. And so that's why I had to leave my community. There was no option. I either had to, and my mom didn't drive. My dad had passed away. My mom didn't drive. So
Right.
my limits, my opportunities to attend a high school were very, very limited.
Yeah,
And so residential school was the only sort of option. And you have to remember, like, the school was already in operation for more than a century. So it just became sort of normalized within our society, within our culture. It was just like, okay, well, you go to school, you go to residential school.
right.
And it was so ingrained in us, my family, that we didn't really see anything wrong with it. And it wasn't until I sat back and I looked at it and I analyzed it and I had to, like, fully see how it impacted my family, not
Mhm.
just me, but my parents and my grandparents and my great grandparents, and to know how that all, you know,
Yeah. How can it not have an
yeah,
impact, right?
yeah, and how I raised my children. Like, I was so independent by the time I was their age. It was really hard for me to understand why they didn't know how to look after themselves. But at the same time, because I didn't have my mom with me, like,
Mm.
like getting up for breakfast, like you prior to residential school, when breakfast, I would smell bacon cooking, my mom in the kitchen making us breakfast and getting up, it was all gentle. Residential school, it was like somebody just walking up and down and just yelling and telling us to get up. And it was very cold.
Right. Okay.
We'd shuffle down, and it was a very regimented schedule. But we're so used to it that we didn't really know how it impacted us and how it changed how we react and how we're able to deal with society. And when I left my abusive partner, I went into a shelter,
Mhm.
and it was a very institutionalized setting, and I was fine. It was familiar.
Right.
And my daughter was like, my oldest daughter felt very bad for me. Like, she was crying because I had to be in a shelter because she was an adult already. And I was like, no, it's not bad. It's, and then I realized, I'm so accustomed to just adjusting to situations. And it's because of how I was raised, like being without the comforts of home, being without, I can do that. I don't have, I'm very I can adapt to any situation,
Mm.
which is a positive, but at the same time, I lack that emotion. I I'm very, I don't want to say I'm cold, but my daughters, my kids, they're very emotional beings. And I don't have any of that because when
Right.
you're in residential school, um, emotions, crying, it was a weakness.
Yeah, you weren't
You
allowed,
needed
right?
to be tough.
Basically. Yeah.
You needed to be tough. Like,
Yeah.
there was no nuns, there was no priests there. It was a lot different,
Mm.
but it was still an institution. And so you didn't ever want to be the one that was, you know, the wimp. You needed to
Yeah.
be tough, you needed to be solid, you needed to, or else you'd get walked all over. You'd be doing somebody else's chores, you'd be doing that. Um, and because I went there alone, I had to be extra tough. I had to be extra solid. And so when I was in the dorm rooms and, sometimes I would be there by myself and I'd be so lonely and just like wanting to go home. I didn't cry though,
Yeah.
because I didn't let anybody see me cry. I was sad, I was hurt, but I just learned to just get through it and not acknowledge those feelings. And that's still, to this day, I still have a really difficult time being emotional.
Yeah.
And that's one of the comforts that I've been able to give my children. Like my mom, because she's a residential school survivor, she never ever said, I love you. She was 75 years old, being wheeled into surgery before she said, I love you.
Wow.
Like, I told her that, but I never ever heard her say it back. And now she's gotten a little better. She can say it. But my children, I told them I loved them from the moment they were born
Yeah,
every day, and it's so common for them to say it. And I don't see their emotions as weakness. I see it as a strength because they're able to live their whole authentic life.
yeah,
I'm still closed off, and I don't think I'll ever be that person.
right.
Maybe when I'm 75, I'll like my mom and I'll be a little more emotional, but yeah, I'm fundamentally changed inside because of that. And
Yeah. Well, it changed who you were meant to be, right? Like if you think about it that way, like I think, like I did a show, it hasn't aired yet, on children who are abused in whatever form that takes. It changes who you were meant to be. So you learn to be somebody else, kind of.
I learned to be a survivor.
Yeah, okay. And it's not like I don't know if you were abused in there, but in a way it was still being separated from your family, right?
Yeah, it was that's why I never like to claim the title of being a survivor, because I wasn't beaten and I wasn't molested, none of those things. But when I really seen how it changed me, I realized why I was so different from my siblings. I realized why
Yeah,
um my mom's relationships with my siblings is different from mine. It's like I'm
yeah,
always the stranger.
yeah,
And maybe she doesn't see that, but I feel it.
right.
I love her, she loves me, but I'm also the only one who can tell her, like, lay down the law and say, "Oh, you got to see the doctor, you got to do this."
Mm,
She listens to me. And I think that's because we're not like I I haven't been dependent on her. I'm
right.
always separate from her. And so she does look to me as someone who is like an outside source, sort of like she will respect me and she will listen to me and she'll do things that she won't do with my other sisters. But
Mm.
she's also a lot closer to the rest of my siblings than she is to me.
Yeah, makes sense. It makes sense, really, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, we're gonna run out of time. But it's so fascinating, you know. I just think about some of the things, you know, as you're talking, some of the things I can relate to, but you know, that's for another time. But anyway,
Hmm.
I'm gonna shut down now. But I want you to stay on camera and talk to the audience, let them know that you've been listening to Kerry Benjoe, and you have a website, or they can find you on Eagle Feather News. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
eaglefeathernews.com. We're likely going to be relaunching and rebranding um, because next month is we're going moving into a quarterly magazine, and we're going to be changing our name to EFN Media.
Oh, okay.
So um,
I saw
yeah,
that somewhere. Somewhere it said EFN. I saw that somewhere when I was looking at more about you on your webpage, on your Facebook page, rather. You know, so
yeah.
anyway, so yeah, so just stay on camera for a second. So thank you everybody for watching the show. I hope you continue to do so. I think I'm going to have Kerry come back at some point because there's so much to hear. Anyway, thank you for watching, everybody. Take care and peace out.